Today, we're talking about some Florida Gators realistic expectations for the football season, Florida Gators basketball, and if Mike White saved his job, and Florida Gators baseball opening weekend, only here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Happy Monday. I am Brandon Olson. You can find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Written work with Whole Nine Sports. And also, before I get into the content, I'm just going to say we're talking softball and women's basketball tomorrow's episode. I figured I'd just group dude sports and women's sports, and we'll roll with that. So first off, though, football time, because that's always the elite stuff here. Florida Gators Ceiling, because that's been, I believe it was Thursday's episode, kind of ran into a lot of comments with that about, just how good is this team? Because when I was talking about the Florida Gators offense, I was like, look, offensively, this team is going to be above average, and that should be the expectation. And that got a lot of people talking about what should be the overall expectations for this team. And I am here. Obviously, expectations, they're high. It's Florida. Like I've said this so many times, we're Florida. There's no average. There's no sport that we're supposed to be bad at. Ain't nothing but excellence here. So Florida, we're here. Billy Napier knocked it out of the park in his first recruiting cycle. His transitional class, he got Kamari Wilson from IMG, got Shamar James to come out. He did his thing over there. But then comes the question of what should the realistic expectations be? And it goes around. You look at sports books, for example. Some places have Florida as the 6th most likely team to win the national championship next year. BetOnline has Florida as the 14th most likely national championship team. And I still am just like, that's too high. But I also understand it, because when you look at who has a chance, all you got to do is, well, if Florida has a strong season, they're going to be high ranked, so they should be there. Even though I think Florida will be a top 25 team. I don't know how high, but I think they'll be a top 25 team. This is a bowl team to me. I don't know if it's a New Year's Six bowl. This is a bowl team to me. The talent isn't at natty levels yet. And I'm not even saying the talent's not on the roster. They're just not developed there yet. They've only had 3 months with this current coaching staff, and that's most of that wasn't even practicing or anything. So, there's talent here, but we kind of went into this past season with very high expectations, which you usually do. I feel like if you have a good year, or I feel like even if you have a bad year, every year your expectation should be improve. So a strong 2020 to 2021 campaign led to Gators fans, and myself included, going, it's a natty time. Like it's time. And then it just didn't work out. And I think that was a good little reality check for Florida, because it helped clarify that the team that we had last year wasn't as talented as we initially expected, which is fair. Because you could be as hard as you want, or as generous as you want with the Gators, but either way, last season was not a good season, no matter which way you slice it, unless you go, hey, Mully's out the door, so it's a good, but not too much. But this year will be a better team than last year. I have no doubt in my mind about that. Like, just the coaching, I think the talent is there and better. I know the effort is there. The roster is a big thing to talk about too, because I just spoke about last season's roster wasn't as good as we initially thought they would be. They didn't reach our expectations for whatever reason. But it's also a good thing that roster turnover was kind of held to a minimum. You look at the NFL draft, and yes, guys like Damian Pierce, Kyer Elam, and Zachary Carter, Jeremiah Moon are all gone. But, I mean, you can look at who transferred too. You look at Chris Bogle, Mahmoud Diabate, they transferred, and that sucks a bit. But also, you look at who came back, and that's Trey Dean, a starting safety. Rashad Torrance wasn't draft eligible. Javon Dexter wasn't draft eligible. Brenton Cox Jr. is someone who was draft eligible, and I really did not think he was going to come back to Gainesville. Just to me, all signs pointed to Brenton Cox Jr., NFL. But after a spotty season, I've called him out plenty for what seemed to be a lack of effort at times and all that fun stuff. I think Brenton Cox Jr. coming back, it's big. And I think he's going to be, again, the premier pass rusher in Gainesville. You also look at who got added to the team, and you can look at the transfers like Osiris Torrance and Montrell Johnson, who are going to be freaky good with this team. There is no doubt in my mind Osiris Torrance and Montrell Johnson are going to be big time players for the 2022 Florida Gators. Like Osiris Torrance, I have very little doubt, if any, about his ability to step in from the Sun Belt to the SEC. I think he looked pretty dang good. And then Montrell Johnson, I mean, he's going to get early run. He's the only one with experience in this Billy Napier system. He's one of the more proven backs on the roster right now because Damian Pierce and Malik Davis are gone. They both are headed to the NFL. And that's, that is what it is at that point. But Montrell Johnson, there's running back space to be open. And you look at the defensive line, it's like, might be a little bit of a weak spot in the interior at first. Zachary Carter's gone to the NFL, but Javon Dexter's back, and that's a big thing. And you look at linebacker, Shamar James is here, and there's been so much talent added onto this defense. Chris McClellan, the 4-star of Oklahoma, could be an immediate starter on this defensive line. So I think when you look at this team for Florida Gators, when you look at 2022, you have to not take it with a grain of salt, but you have to acknowledge that there's a ton of potential on this team. I'm not saying they're national champs. I think 14th most likely sounds absurd. But again, if Florida has a good season, if Florida has a strong season and they're top tier SEC, they're going to be in the national title picture. Where you could be in the if TCU has a great season, you still can't guarantee that they'll be in the Natty. The Big 12 winners aren't guaranteed to be in the national championship. If you win the SEC, you're going to the playoffs. But Big 12, you're not guaranteed to go to the playoffs. So I think that played a part in it of just being like, hey, if Florida gets a couple things right for them this year, they could be in the picture. So 14th betting odds wise, I think is solid. I think that's fair. I don't think they're going to be the 14th best team in the nation, but I think when you look at national championship odds, 14th is why not give it a go at that point? But I think the record is going to be more like 8-4, 9-3. Which to me, that's one hell of a first season, if we're being honest. I think that's a great year, great first year, and I think it's very possible. Utah is going to be a rough start to the season, going with Kentucky in week 2, and I mean, there's obviously LSU, Georgia, going to be tough games, but this is a team where I look at the Florida Gators and I'm like, I can see it. I can see the pieces being put into place. And I think that this is a Florida Gators team that I don't know if they'll make a deep run, but I think it's a top 25 Florida Gators team, and I'm very excited for it. Anybody else make money this weekend? I know I did. I'm not gonna lie. I got a little saucy with it on Saturday and Sunday. A little bit of a cookout here. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to place a bet on all of your sports action. Obviously, Florida losing a ton hasn't been great for me, but NBA props are just bang, 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 bang. It's just wild. BetOnline.net even covers award shows, TV shows, and reality TV with real-time updated odds and props on almost anything you can imagine. It's the best way to place your bets, and it's 100% free to sign up. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today, which you guys know, always on my phone when I do it. BetOnline.net, it's where the game starts. Looking at Florida Gators basketball now, and this is one of those, it was a victory, we're going to be happy about it, but at the same time, bittersweet victory. I'll say that. We could look at the first time ever that the Florida Gators have beaten the number 2 team in the nation in Gainesville. And I will also say, for people that are mad about, storming the court, shut up. Like no one cares, man. If you're mad about storming the court, then just stop being so soft about it. That ain't nothing. Florida won 63-62 in a game where Florida really wasn't supposed to win, where for a good portion of the game, it didn't look like Florida would win, and they beat the number 2 team in the nation. And I get it, people. I understand the argument of the teams that storm the court aren't usually good teams. They're not usually storied programs. That's how much this team has fallen off and this program has fallen off. And I get it and I hear you, but I think that logic is dumb. I'll say, I think that's horrible logic, because I think when you storm the court, it's about, we weren't supposed to win this game. And this was a huge game, and we won this game. So we're gonna storm the court. I've rushed a field before. I would love to rush a court. I've rushed a field before, and it was literally just, we weren't supposed to win this game. Really, we weren't supposed to win this game, but we did it. And I know that people brought up and Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn brought this up when we did our little crossover bonus episode on Friday, where he was like, "Hey, Auburn hasn't won in Gainesville since 1996," and that's wild that that's true. But yeah, Auburn hasn't won a game in Gainesville since 1996, and you can talk about that, and you can be like, "Look, we don't care if we were favored to win or not. They haven't won in 96, and they still haven't, and that's great. Or they haven't won since 96, and that's great. But when you look at it, this is still the number 2 team in the nation, and the Gators are barely a March Madness team even after this win. So I think that, yeah, storming the court, whatever, being happy, go for it. Talking more about the actual game itself, before I get to Florida, Auburn, Jabari Smith, my Lord, he's a bad man over there. He was doing some things. He's freaky good. But looking at the Florida side, you look at Tyrese Appleby, because that man, I'm freezing right now, because he is cold-blooded. He is a beast. 26 points on 7 for 15 shooting, 5 for 10 from 3. He had 1 or 2 assists, but when he made those assists were big plays, a little dump off to Colin Castleton here and there. It was big plays. Tyrese Appleby played a great game. And then looking at Colin Castleton, built different. 19 points on 7 of 13 shooting, 8 rebounds, 3 blocks. And the commentators even said it multiple times. He just had a look in his eye. Pre-game, Colin Castleton just had a look in his eye. And it was something's different about him today. And we saw that, where even coming out of that game, now I've been the one that I'm like, look, Colin Castleton's a fantastic college basketball player. I don't know if he's going to be the good in the NBA or if he's got an NBA future, really. But I think if you've got that dog mentality where you could just D-O-G, not D-A-W-G, don't worry about it. But if you got that dog mentality where you could turn it on and you could turn it up and you could just take over like that, I think that goes a long way when you look at being a professional athlete. And Colin Castleton, dude, props to you. That was big. Outside of Castleton and Appleby, though, the other Gators combined for 18 points. So it wasn't an overall offensive team win. Defensively, good job. That, I don't have many complaints. I think Florida did a fantastic job holding Auburn to 62 and just keeping guys in check for the most part. Jabari Smith had 28 of the 62. So, outside of that, it was a damn good job for the Florida Gators. And the thing that's bittersweet about it is, and I mentioned this in the intro to the show, did Mike White save his job? Because I've been very pro over the past couple of weeks, especially. I've been very pro fire Mike White. But, and hear me out, my opinion hasn't changed. The movement of fire Mike White just had a lot more push and a lot more moxie before you go, well, he just beat the number 2 team in the nation for the first time ever in Gainesville. He beat another top 10 team, He's done that, I want to say 6 times since taking over with the Florida Gators. So you could be like, hey, he's beaten plenty of top 10 teams before. And no. Um, I've said it a billion times now. Roster's not good enough. If the roster's not good enough, it's his fault. If the roster is good enough, it's his fault. This team isn't reaching their expectations or reaching their potential. So it's still Mike White. And look, it was a big win against Auburn. It was like that. I am taking nothing away from that victory. He did a solid job too. I'm not taking that from him either. What I will say though is the win over Auburn, as good as it was, does not excuse the losses to Texas Southern. It doesn't excuse the losses to Ole Miss. The Texas A&M loss just last week was a really awful one. I give him credit, and I feel like I do a solid job of giving credit where credit is due. Mike White, you did a good job against Auburn. Like, you did your thing, and you kept your team into it the entire time. Like, there was never a point where this game really felt out of hand, and then the Florida Gators took over, and it really changed. And I mean, the last minute wasn't greatly handled. Like the last when there were 9.9 seconds left and Florida had to inbound it. I don't like the idea of just forcing it to Colin Castleton, and I think that was a bad decision. But for the most part, Mike White, you did a good job this year, this past Saturday. You did a good job against Auburn. But yeah, the wins don't excuse the losses. They don't excuse all of the times where Florida should have been winning dominantly, like manhandling opponents and barely winning or losing. And it doesn't and yeah, all the times that Florida does win a come from behind game, it's like, why is Florida always behind? Mike White, and like I was joking in the YouTube comments last week where someone was like, "Oh, Mike White uses it as an armrest," and I said it's a food tray for him, like the whiteboard. Like I don't get what he's doing with it half the time. But you did a good job against Auburn. I don't think it was enough to save his job. I hope it wasn't enough to save his job. But ultimately, I think that we'll see towards the end of the season, like when the season ends, what we're looking at. If Florida makes March Madness, how far they make it, if they do make it. But I don't think it's I don't think it's gonna work out with Mike White. Same way as Dan Mullen. Like I don't think he's a bad coach. It's just not the right time, place, coaching talent. I don't think he's a bad coach. I just don't think he's good enough for Florida. And I've been very open about that. And I think it's a fair assessment for me to make. It's the new year, so that means it's New Year's resolution time. If yours is about getting fit, eating healthier, working out more, whatever it might be, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. I'm bad at keeping my New Year's resolution. I just got back into working out again because I was like, hey, I gotta clean it up. But every year, my weakness is the sweet tooth. It's even when I'm not, that's like a New Year's resolution. Like it's the sweet tooth that gets me every single time. But with Built Bar, at least I get to handle it a little better. It's already coated in 100% chocolate. Most bars have 130 calories and just 4 net carbs, along with 17 grams of protein. So you can throw out the hidden stashes, Reese's in the what was it, desk drawer, Kit Kat in the cupboard, whatever it might be. Just make sure to get Built Bar to replace it. You don't got to sneak around. You don't got to feel guilty. Built Bar is always coming out with new limited time flavors so that you'll never get bored. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your next order. That is locked, LOCKED 15 to get 15% off of your next order at built or builtbar.com. To wrap up today's show, we are talking about the Florida Gators baseball team, number 9 in the nation. And I mean, starting 3 lefties in opening weekend, it was a big deal. And the Florida Gators baseball team has started the season 1-2. So things didn't go as we planned they would go or as we hoped they would go. It's a little rough. Florida did win the first game of the series on Friday night, but on Saturday, and yesterday afternoon, not so much. It was a little rough. The first game, the Florida Gators won 7-2. Like it was a solid win. It was a pretty low scoring game. And then in the 7th inning, the Florida Gators scored 4 runs, which we'll get into how they did that in just a second. But yeah, it was a relatively low scoring game, and then Florida really separated at that point. But Sterling MFN Thompson. Beast mode by Sterling Thompson. 2 home runs in the game. One of them was a solo shot. And in the 7th inning, when the Florida Gators scored 4 runs, that was because Sterling Thompson hit a grand slam to finish with a total of 5 of the 7 Florida Gators RBIs. He had 2 home runs, obviously, 5 of the RBIs, which is a monster game. Like, if you get 5 RBIs in a game, that's a monster game. I don't care what it is. And that was big for Sterling Thompson to really help the Gators get over the hump. I mean, hey, they won 7-2. Without him, it's 2-2. I get that's not exactly how it works because someone else would still fill in that production and maybe go the same way, but you get the point. Hunter Barco had a hot start to the season, allowing just 1 hit and 1 walk in 6 innings pitched, but that's not even the bigger part, and 1 hit, 1 walk is a phenomenal start. What I was more impressed by was 11 strikeouts in those 6 innings pitched. Like that is just dominant performance by Hunter Barco. And it's big too because, I spent Friday's episode, I was talking about Hunter Barco replacing Tommy Mace from last season. And I was like, look, like he's going to be the ace. He's going to be our guy. And he came out and he was like, yeah, I'm going to be the ace. I'm going to be the guy. And he put up just a completely dominant performance in his first start as the ace, really, for the 2022 Florida Gators. So big for Hunter Barco. Ryan Slater came in to pick up his first save of the season in that one. The second game wasn't as positive for the Florida Gators. Again, Florida's offense didn't get rolling early on, really. But, I mean, Florida was down at 1.4-0 after just 2.5 innings. So not wonderful. Timmy Manning did have a bit of a rough start. Rough start to the season for him. 3 innings pitched, 5 hits, 4 earned runs. It wasn't great offensively. There weren't a ton of bright spots in the second game on Saturday. It was just lackluster throughout. Like, the bats couldn't get going early, and then towards the end of the game, it was like, yeah, they're rallying, but it just didn't work out the way that any of us had hoped it would work out against Liberty on the second day. Like, I was hoping for a sweep to start the year. I was like, that would be a dope way to start, but that didn't happen. So that was a little bit rough. But then during yesterday's game, Sunday's game, Florida started the game up 3-0 after 4 innings. But after that, it was a big for the Gators. It was just a snoozer for them. Liberty scored 5 runs after those 4 innings where Florida was up 3-0. And that included 3 runs in the 5th inning. So Liberty came right back at Florida after that one. And when I was going into this game, I was like, specifically this third game, going into the whole series, I cared about pitching because if you don't know me by now, hi, Brandon Olson. Every sport, I love defense. So I was like, hey, I'm really looking forward to the pitching in this weekend slate right here. 3 lefty starters. It's going to be dope. It's just going to be awesome to see. And specifically the Sunday game, I was like, I need to see this pitching. I need to see this pitching because the starter was Pierce Coppola from New Jersey, from Verona, New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken. And it was his first college start. And I was like, this is going to be an awesome start for him. Like, whether or not it goes great, it's going to be awesome to see him because he's a toolsy big dude. And I was like, he's 6'7", 6'8", hits 94 miles per hour, has a changeup, a slurve. Like, he's got the makeup that I would have in a road to the show player. And it was an okay first outing, I'll say. 4.1 innings pitched, or 4 1/3, 5 hits, 7 strikeouts, 2 earned runs. And I mean, I think when you look at a kid who's probably got pregame jitters and probably has game jitters for his first college start for a big blue chip program, I think that's an okay start. Like, I don't have a big problem with that. Like, 5 hits is a bit much, and the 2 earned runs wasn't great. But, I mean, 7 strikeouts in just 4 1/3 innings. Like, I think you're showing that you've got the makeup here. We'll just hope that he can, kind of piece it all together as the season goes on. After that, Philip Abner gave up 2 more runs, and that ultimately decided the game, as that was It was a painful one to watch. But offensively, BT Rappel drove in 2 of the runs with a home run that brought in Josh Rivera as well for Florida. And there are certain things where on Friday I was like, oh, I want to see these players step up with more playing time. Kendrick Carlisle was one of those players that I named, and not a good start to the season for him. He's got 1 walk so far. That's the only time he's gotten on base. He's 0 for 11 to start the season outside of that 1 walk. So hopefully Kendrick Carlisle will kind of flip things over and get back into it. The Gators take on Stetson tomorrow evening at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Be sure not to miss that one. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more about our Florida Gators, including softball and women's basketball. Be sure to check out Locked On Bets. I'm telling you, they're going to help make you some money. Your boy Q, Lee Sterling, every day. Locked On Bets. For Locked On Gators, I am Brandon Olson. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all of my written work with Whole Nine Sports. That is WHOLENINE Sports. And I will see you all tomorrow.